Across the world, the US, Japan, France, South Korea, the UK, popular comic characters have spawned franchises covering everything from clothes to toys to books to TV shows to movies to figurines to theme parks. The most famous example of this is the Mouse House or Disney, which has built a multi-billion-dollar business, of course. It's suffering now on account of the pandemic, with theme parks attendance dropping as Mickey and Donald lovers focus on saving their lives rather than entertaining themselves. But the fact is, fans can't just get enough of Disney and Marvel characters, as they put them on everything from toilet paper to underwear to swimsuits to sunglasses to bandages and what have you. Is is that kind of fan love even possible in India? Possible even in India? Can a scalable licensing and merchandising franchise be built on the back of common characters? To answer these questions, we have a fabulous panel. I'll begin without wasting any more time by asking them, what is the state of the licensing business in India? And each of your guys can come up and beginning with, we have one lady on the panel. We'll begin with Mitali.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Character licensing, merchandising, I think has been around in India for years now. But I would say while we've evolved to some extent, I think if you kind of compare us to the West, we still have, a bit of untapped potential. We still have that little bit of ground to cover. Having said that, I think, we are at the stage where, we've created some great Indian IPs. We have Rajiv on the panel. I mean, he's the biggest example of, an Indian IP succeeding and doing so phenomenally well. Chota Bheem, I think, probably rules, every possible category as of today, especially where the whole mass market is concerned. We've also managed to successfully bring in quite a few, global IPs, whether it's from the Universal Studios, whether it's Minions, Fast and Furious, Jurassic, brands like...
Game of Thrones.
Sorry?
You can't forget Game of Thrones.
And Game of Thrones, of course. I mean, we've lived all of that. I mean, Game of Thrones has been one of our biggest success stories ever, for sure. So yes, we've been there, done that. But I think, like I said, there is a long way to go. Frankly, irrespective of local or international, what is common for all of these is, a fan base. It's very important that each one of these creates their own community of fans. Fans are obviously, the ones who make these brands. They're always looking at taking a piece of, the brand back to their house, consuming this, making it a part of their day-to-day lives. And this fan base, of course, then depends on, how popular the brand is. So again, if you look at the West, you have brands like Harry Potter and Star Wars and Batman. And these are not just well-renowned, otherwise, but they're also super successful licensed properties. And that's because, they've managed to create this whole mega world and this culture beyond just films and content, something that the fans can totally immerse themselves into. So I think that's where we need to probably step a notch higher. And that's the reason I say there is a gap, and, there's lots more that we can really do to kind of fulfill this gap.
Yeah, so I'll move on to the next person who's been plowing this path for a long time. Jiggy, over to you. Can you unmute yourself? Unmute, Jiggy, first things first.
Yeah. So, firstly, great to be on this panel, and thank you very much for inviting. Just a few things, right? One is, I'll talk specifically about licensing and then come to comics. Why has India not really taken off? Just cut the... I always keep saying this. There are 3 tick marks. 2 of them work phenomenally well in India. We have a very... all forms of entertainment is fairly inexpensive. It's unheard of in Southeast Asia, anywhere or any other part of the world, that for as little as a few dollars that you could get such a plethora of channels. And as a result of now most of us having mobile phones, we have access to all content. Even premium content is really inexpensive, right? Second is our consuming class is large, our niches are large. So even when we say things like, oh, does anybody in India listen to Western classical music, right? If you just look at the pure numbers, it may be higher than Germany, potentially. The challenge is, how do we get these fans to connect with commerce in any form? That's the biggest challenge. So what is the missing piece really is retail. So though we all keep talking about this great retail story, the retail story is really not great, because if you walk across to Southeast Asia, I'm not even talking about getting to the US or Europe. Large part of India is unorganized retail. Unorganized retail is almost 98%. What happens with unorganized retail is two things. One is unaccounted for royalties. So you will never see royalties, or let me not be so negative. So I'm saying that you will see very less royalties. Second is that you will not see your products really placed beautifully. So what is working phenomenally well is online. Lot of private equity money thrown, great fans can connect it, etc. But my biggest pet peeve on the online side of the business, especially with the majors, is the fact that they are optimized towards increasing the number of resellers, and they are not optimized towards protecting IP. So for every single brand that you have, promise you, if you had to shut down any of these guys through the legit route of an IP, anything. So if Abhijeet has to, and Abhijeet, I'm a big fan of the stuff that you do, especially with Angry Moshi and
Thank you
fanboys
so
more
much.
just based on how good the art is. Yeah, it's beautiful. So I'm saying that if he had to put out product on Amazon, and it becomes cult, and his fan following does capture it, you will see there'll be resellers selling the same thing, and he will have a greater challenge to shut it down. He may not, because he's the IP owner and all of that, but if he had to get a licensing agent or anybody who's representing him in the middle, the guy will struggle. While if I was to be the guy doing the non-legit stuff, I can put it up very, very quickly as a distributor. There are various ways to do that. So really the big boys will need to figure out a way of, and this is not really a challenge of India. It's a challenge really even with Alibaba in China, because it was a constant thing with when you look at especially what's happening with the premium brands, right? So that was the first question, and this the first answer really on the licensing business, and that's the only block towards really scaling this business and making it amazingly large. The second one is in comics. So comics, really, the one has to figure out whether it is does this brand come out of comics, or is the question related to can a brand like Chota Bheem, for example, translate to comics? If it is the latter, it's amazingly small, the opportunity, primarily because there is just a handful of publishers, and even if you have the publishers, they need to still take the risk of doing it, and you're better served in doing something digitally, or you're better served if, for example, I tuned in, Abhijeet, a little earlier to listen to your session, and I agree with you on that count, that if you're looking at it as a marketing multiplier rather than revenue, I'm sure there will be revenue eventually, but if you're it's possible to do the marketing part of it first rather than the revenue, because the revenue is a little more challenging. But in the case of things that come, what we should be focusing on is to build the culture of what Rajiv's done and what Abhijeet is doing. More Abhijeet than Rajiv for the first time. I just say that because since we are on a comic forum, is to build something that comes out of this world, which then becomes bigger in other worlds. So if you look at the West, whether it is Men in Black, or whether it is even films like Road to Perdition and all of that, they all came out of sequential art or comics, right? And from that came whatever else from a licensing point of view that got built. So I'm more of a believer that should be the route, rather than thinking of can a Motu Patlu or a Chota Bheem find itself.
But Motu Patlu was actually a comic earlier. It became a TV franchise.
I'm sorry, I take that back. I was talking more from some of the questions we were talking about. Like, I'm sure, Rajiv, even in the case of comics, would be a
he's ventured into that recently. I'll be talking to him about it.
Okay, so sorry, I tend to place most of my questions to Rajiv, but because he's quite a pioneer in this business, as Mitali said. So my perspective is more on licensing. What's the big limitation is retail. What is the hope is online. And in the case of comics, I would be more pro creators who take this from comics into the other world, rather than can we leverage something that is large on television and make it work for comics.
Okay, I get your point. Yeah, I'll move on to Satish now. So you've actually turned out to be an e-commerce kind of a player online directly. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, we're predominantly offline, in fact, Anil.
Yeah, but are you offline now?
So that's a good question. So I mean, if you keep last year aside, we were doing fairly well offline, but last year onwards, we've been about, I think we're at 50% of our numbers offline. So right now, offline is brutal. I mean, the business is, you've got all of this pressure from the landlords and the malls to kind of, get back to normal rentals, and the market's far from normal. So, but yeah, our business is still largely offline because of the way the company was.
I thought you would have pivoted.
We are trying to, but it's for us online is, I mean, we don't have private equity money, so we're not looking at burning cash and scaling. We're trying to do this in a way that's profitable. So you can scale online. I mean, in fact, last year at one point we were doing great numbers, but then we figured out that, we were bleeding on every transaction. So then how does that make sense, right? For us, at least, as a, this is, our own money. So we're not looking at sort of saying, okay, chalo, theek hai yaar, just burn cash, get customers in. Okay. So we're sort of going slow and steady. We are scaling, but because of the setup of our business, we're still more offline than online. But I think it's a bit of, there's some very interesting points raised by Mitali and Jiggy there. I do think that there is a gap in the market. There is a demand for content from the audience. At least being an offline player, we interact with a lot of people. And our audience wants content. They're hungry for content. They want stuff that's there in the US or UK or wherever. Now the challenge here is that how do you get it to them, right? If the retailers like us have to get into IP licensing and then create product also and put it in the market, you're trying to solve too many problems at once. Right. So we've got to try and focus on building market, and then there's got to be a proper steady stream of licensees to provide us with good content. And I think that's where the big gap is for me here. There isn't enough people providing enough merchandise. So I don't have a demand issue, I have a supply issue. So, I mean, you look at the IP that's out there that's popular right now, and we're just focused still on Marvel and DC, and just, the top few 5 are the ones represented. Everything else in the bottom of the, behind that is just, there's a gap. So that's just my sort of view on this.
Okay. Chilaka Sab, you've been, as everyone keeps pointing fingers at you as being the pioneer, as the guy who's changing the scene here. So, how's it been going? And Satish is saying he doesn't have enough product. You have product. Why don't you guys get married?
That was a good one, Anil. So hey, hello everyone. So I think this comics licensing, merchandising is a pretty exciting field. The biggest kick. So example, when we made Chhota Bheem, when we know the ratings were great, everything is, we don't see it visually, right? But when we put out some products in the stores, and then when I visited the stores, one of our first product was a comic. So when I went and stood in the store. This was, I think, Big Bazaar in one of the in Mumbai. So I went there and was standing, and then this small kid saw the Chhota Bheem comic and she wanted to buy it. And the mother said, but you can't even read it. She said, but I want it. And so she insisted, and the mother gave up. And then and then I went to introduce myself, and I said, can I buy the comic for her? And the mother was a little touched. She didn't let me pay for it, but she bought it. So what was for me, it's a memory for me, because it went on to stay in my head. And I realized that, if you have a fan out there, he picks up your product off the desk. That's the biggest accomplishment actually. And the biggest thrill is, more than when you see it on content on TV or something, when you see your product in store, that's amazing. So now Bheem is 13 years old. We started way back in 2008. our merchandising is almost 12 years old, and we've been at it for a while. And so, and then we have many ups and downs and stuff. But for the interest of the somebody who's new to the industry of L&M, let me differentiate and explain what is licensing, what is merchandising, because there's a lot of confusion for youngsters especially. So basically, example, we take a merchandise. A merchandise is basically, so example, as a company, Green Gold, I put Chota Bheem image on a t-shirt, which I source myself from, let us say, Tirupur or Haryana or wherever, and I sell it myself. That becomes a merchandise. So, but what if Reliance Trends or a Shoppers Stop, somebody licenses my character, they pay me a royalty or pay me a fee, and they buy the rights to put Bheem on their t-shirts, that becomes licensing. Again, licensing has two kinds: promotional licensing and product licensing. And so when I mean, what is a product license is basically when your license is basically the product, which is basically uh, example, if you are selling noodles and you put inside that, okay, free tattoos of whatever chutki character inside. So basically you're selling your product, but you're doing that by promoting and giving away some freebie. That is promotional licensing. But example, now if your product is a t-shirt, example, and Bheem is on it, so that is the product itself. So that is kind of product licensing. And so we had, between both of them, like when somebody is starting out, somebody has an IP, they want to go and do merchandise or license. Always the easier option is license, because you work with an expert who's out there, who will do it for you. He will take your product to across India or probably across the world. So that is the easier thing. But many times when we believe that our IP is amazing, but others don't believe, so a good experiment would be like we make our own merchandise and distribute in the market. That's how you can prove that with your sale, you can prove to people that, listen, my product is working, and please go and why don't you license it? So for example, the first 4 years of Chota Bheem, we didn't even have one license of Bheem done. But once we had our first license happening in 2013, I think, just before our movie, from there we have done more than 100 licensing deals, and around 50 are pretty active. So that's just briefly I want to distinguish between licensing and merchandising for the interest of the young viewers out there.
Yeah, but Rajiv, see what Jiggy said, that he wouldn't like to see a Chota Bheem become a comic. Indirectly, he was saying that. Do you agree? I disagree with Jiggy.
So I don't think Jiggy exactly meant that, but I think the important thing is, as your product can be put, they say 360-degree monetization. So a successful IP, you can put it on anywhere, like you mentioned earlier, right from socks to shoes to underwear, and anything is possible. Any product actually being made, even jewelry nowadays, I think you see kids jewelry also out there, where you have Mickey Mouse or some other character there. Even Bheem is on some of the jewelry items. So you can do that. So whatever you want to do, you can do it. So obviously, when somebody is buying, your product stays alive. If no one is buying, your product is dead. So I think as businessmen, we have to figure out what product is working, and we have to keep innovating, in the sense, we can't take the same product every year to the market and expect the same kind of sale. So we need to be wise. And of course, with so much changing in the the China space and stuff, I think local manufacturing is happening, which means we have more scope for innovating. Earlier, we didn't have a chance to innovating much, because we had to wait 3 months from your product to arrive from China. And then if you sell out your products in 10 days, then you have to wait another 3 months to get that product back. So, but amazing things are happening. I think you will see that India is growing in this space. I think the buying power of Indians has gone up dramatically. I think there are so many great products made in India, but nobody's just putting their products out there because they're focusing on other things. But I think there is tremendous opportunities for many great brands in India, especially the lot of new shows have come up. I think they have to explore and they have to think in that direction and take a gutsy call in that direction.
How are your comics doing, by the way?
They're still doing fantastic. So I was telling, like, when we started, that was the first product. And the first time we did a sample thing, we sold about 5,000 comics at one single stall exhibition within about 1.5 days. That's when we realized the potential of comics. And then from that day, we have produced over 130 or 120 comics. We have printed over about 10 million copies so far and sold all of them, and then we are recently stopped focusing in producing new comics and stuff because Beam has been then around for a while. We are been now most recently we have had huge success with Mighty Little Beam, which is a spin-off version of Beam. So it's more of a preschool show. So right now currently we are focusing on that product, but due to COVID, we are just holding our horses. But Beam Mighty Little Beam becoming popular in 190 countries and in countries in Latin America, in Europe and stuff. So now we're figuring out how do we now, earlier the challenge in India is like Jiggy said, it's unorganized retail pretty much, but globally it is organized, but it's really hard to crack in. So we're working on that. Someday our product will be across the globe, and we're working hard for that, and still a long way to go. It's been 2 years. Beam has been on Netflix, and it's the number one preschool show ever on Netflix. So we're very proud of that, but we still have a long way because we want to make sure that when you land in a London airport, or you land in probably New York airport when things are normal, and if you go to a kid store, we want everyone to see our product, and we are working towards that. It's not going to be easy.
Yeah, but again, so would your publishing house be open to other artists? And secondly, why not put Mighty Beam in motion comics?
As of now, because it's a digital product, we don't want to kind of have many places to watch Mighty Little Beam. So we want it to be exclusive to Netflix as of now, and we want to focus on other things. And we are kind of, as a studio, we are trying to get another hit somewhere. We've been trying to go away from Beam and do something, but we've been failing so far. We hope someday we'll create another Beam or something else which works for us. And so it's not as easy as said.
Okay, I'll move on to you're a creator, but so is Abhijeet. From a creator's perspective, Abhijeet, I'd like you to share your views on licensing and merchandising. You said in the last session that you were doing reasonably well with that. Quantify that.
So what happened was around 2011 was when the first Comic-Con in Mumbai happened, and so my wife and I, we run Kini Studios, and we decided, okay, if we're getting a stall, we need to sell stuff. So that is when this entire idea of merchandising, using my art on surfaces and seeing, the kind of people's response over it works. And that is when Angry Maushi was really tested, and people loved the character, and they were very curious to find out what she is about. And I was very happy when Jiggy mentioned that Fanboys is also up there for him, because that's not reached the following that Angry Maushi has. But for me, it's a very special comic because it's like comic nerd, nerds like me would be doing the stuff that they do. And that is when we decided to take this seriously, as the merchandising aspect seemed interesting to us. So what happened was, there was a particular production house which showed interest in a movie rights for Angry Maushi, and I was like, man, my mind was blown to smithereens. I was like, shit, now here comes the big motherload. Okay, I'm talking money here, and all cockiness just came in. I went to that meeting, and I got to tell you this, it was probably the crappiest figure ever quoted to me. I felt like a slap on my face, and I felt like, is this how?
Kitna tha? 10 rupiya?
7,000.
Oh fuck! Sorry. That came out involuntarily.
My jaw dropped. I don't know how else I would have reacted. I went there with some numbers in mind. I consulted with a couple of people. That's the number I was told, and it was insulting. So I spoke to I have family friend lawyers who are IP lawyers. They took me through the entire process so that obviously I'm not going to fall for a trap like that, but they said, let's safeguard it. So which is when we started a process of copywriting it and having it under so many different categories, etc., all countries wherein this works. What's a process tha? The pro side of it is, of course, then there was a game studio which approached us. Again, it didn't fall through because they had particular things in mind. The whole idea of rewriting it, many times these people want to rewrite it because they feel it's too adult and we want to convert it to a children friendly property, which I as a creator have not taken the bait yet. I don't want to, because so far the comics are fine, the IP is fine the way it is for me, unless I really sell my soul someday and say, okay, you know what, fine. Just like the Ninja Turtles guys just gave away their thing, and now Ninja Turtles has become like a completely adult comic, the way it was supposed to be, by the way. So that's how my experience with IPs, this entire copyright process. And I am an indie artist. I am no way as exposed to the market as all you guys. These are things that I learned, and I spent a lot of money even having the legal things done. The hearings costed me, and I was after a while thinking, is it even worth it? But I did realize that adding that R on the logo adds a lot. It adds a tremendous amount of weightage, at least when we do our pitches to clients, because when we talk to clients, we show our IPs as well. If we are taking commission work, we show our IPs as well. Now with Kini Studios, we have now got a website where we are selling all the merchandise, and of course with Satish, his fantastic initiative right now with One Tribe, with Entertainment Store, we are so glad to be part of it. He is making sure that people like me are able to display and have a merchandise on the racks, which is I haven't heard of anything like that here in retail spaces. So thanks, Satish. Thanks once again. Plugging that in right here. But that's my experience with the merchandising and licensing. And in the lockdown, what happened was I was never too much into the first time I saw masks printed with characters, and I was like, "Yaar, ye thoda zyada ho gaya." You're just using the pandemic for. But that's where it was. And then even we took the bait. We did Maushi masks where it's just a facing Kaire virus and all that, and it just picked up. We were happy with the response it got, and it has that typical Maushi scowl. So net, what I've learned is it's again, everyone here knows much more than what I do, but from a very individual artist point of view, it's a tricky space to be, and you need to be very safeguarded. You need to be very careful. You still would see people copying your work. You still would see, and then my lawyers always say that, do you have the money to follow this up? Because you're not a company, you are at the end a proprietor of a studio. Would you have the money to follow up with certain companies or certain individuals who probably have a legal team ready to counter attack? So ye sab aa jata hai, and you're like, I'm an artist, I'm not supposed to be in that deep shit, I'm supposed to do my art, but that's not where it is. So a lot of my students, when I take workshops or my lectures, I am a guest faculty at a couple of colleges, they ask me, how does IP work and how cheap or how costly is it? I say, if you have a piggy bank, start saving. And only if you're confident that your idea is worth selling, should you invest in converting it to something that would you want to spend so much money on it. And once you do, you've got to be steadfast on it. So with comics, yes, like Jiggy mentioned, it's a starting point. You don't make bread and butter by just selling comics. What I always say is you have to use that into other merchandise. You have to use then further into some sort of social media content or pitching to clients, stuff like that. I'll just quickly, like one of my comic characters is this guy, Hira the Hero. He's from my comic Ek Din Ka Hero. What we do is we actually have tied up with an NGO here in Santa Cruz. And these guys are into terracotta sculpting for a good cause. So, we co-brand this with them, and in a way, we market it in such a way that it's 100% Indian, it's 100% handmade, It's as organic as it gets. And of course, there's a comic character from my comic, which is there on your shelf. We've proudly sent it to Satish's store as well, and we are really, really looking forward to them flying there. But that's how I go about it. So maybe a little different than how a bigger brand would go about it, but on my particular front, this is what I have managed, and I have plans to do the same with a couple other IPs as well.
But Abhijeet, I can completely relate to what you said in terms of people telling you to kind of make it more kiddish and stuff like that, because when I don't know if you all read, but we just announced Captain 7 with MS Dhoni, which is it's supposed to be this really cool spy action paced series, and when we bounce it off to some of these really big broadcasters, we had a lot of them actually telling us things like it's too action packed and it's too sleek, and can you make it more slapstick and things like that. And we were like, no, this is not supposed to be slapstick. We're trying a completely new thing here. We're trying premium animation, probably, which has not been explored in India. And people have their opinions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but Mitali, you were once on that side with Viacom.
I was, and I'm not denying that. And I would have probably
said the same thing. Everyone.
I would have probably said the same thing back then, but now I'm on this other side, and if we decide that this is how an IP is supposed to be, we would never want to dilute it because of what somebody else thinks may work or not work, because that's what we want to do. We want to innovate. We want to break into the clutter and kind of do something which is path breaking. Maybe it won't take off, we don't know, but we are fairly confident. And I think if we stick to our route and, if we stick to what we've decided, then we definitely have something going there. Who knows, we might just start a trend on, a premium kind of animation and things like that. So
that'll be awesome.
While Anil plays Arnab, just one response to Abhijeet. Abhijeet, I think most of us... I think firstly, two takeouts. One is that you should do a conversation with Rajiv on the side, because he's gone the whole cycle of IP, and he spent a lot of time with us on, the challenges that he had, both from protecting his IP as well as getting all the way up to movies. And and he's very candid, but it will take a lot of time if we run it through this session. But specifically responding to what you said, because there would be also a bunch of people inspired enough to be putting out things like you do. It's easy for anyone to say, hey, don't drop out, don't sell out, all of that. But the fact of the matter is, in India, the animation and the drive is coming, or where is the market and where is the money coming from? Right? It is coming from the kids channels. And one will have to finally... I'm not asking you to do that, but I'm saying that is the reason why everybody is doing more or less the chotas. You'll see one is this chota world which is coming up. The second one is a sequel to every possible movie and franchise in Hindi films, which is now going to be made into something, right? So it will follow that trend, and someone has to break it. So I would say more power to just keeping with the game. And just to clarify what I said right in the beginning, is to see if you can move from where you are into the worlds of the VOD platforms. If any of them would be interested in looking at...
In fact, I'm going to step in here. Jiggy, I'm going to step in here. Rajiv, you're looking for your next big hit. Pick up Angry Mousey here.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, I think, see, I would connect with, of course, Abhijeet on the side. I think one thing what I have learned is that if you have, like I said, the proof of the success of the product is only when you put the product out in the market. Otherwise, you never know. And it is not easy. Like, sometimes you cannot understand why someone is buying this product. I mean, you put the most logic into it. Why this character is hit, no one can explain. The kids only can explain. And so it's interesting, like a thing. But
except in Angry Mousey is a little older kids.
Actually. What I mean to say is that you never know what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, that's true. That is something that is very tricky. And I think with Green Gold, it's become a benchmark for many that, "Arey, karna hai to aisa karna." You guys have owned it. So, but creators who want to look at the South Park kind of audience or the little adult humor, that's the tricky part right now. I don't know. I really have no thoughts as to where to start from, and also where we are doing. What we are doing right now is comics, but I'll be very interested in seeing where that space goes from here.
I think, say, I know a lot of.
Sorry, sir, go ahead.
Sorry. So a lot of adults, they want to wear, the favorite comic book characters or, animated characters on the T-shirt. They don't have a choice but wear Avengers or whatever. There's nothing else out there. So, example, if it is meant for older adult audiences, that actually works. Like, and a great test is, print 1,000 T-shirts or something. Try to take it to the market. You never know, because they need. Like you have seen some brands, I forgot which one, which has wobbly head and funny tantra, or some companies like this have come and gone, and couldn't face the. It's a difficult business to be in. Merchandising and licensing. It's not so easy. Animation itself is difficult, and L&M is even more difficult. And but yeah, always great to give it a shot. Go ahead, Satish.
Hey, thanks, Rajiv. No, I completely agree with what you've just said. I think, Abhijeet, the market, so it isn't that there's only a market for kids' properties. Like, we've built a business around catering to the youth. So we as a business don't even cater to children below 8 or 10. Most of our products are centered around the youth. So there is a market. Properties like The Simpsons and Rick and Morty, there's huge amounts of merchandise being sold in India. So when it comes to selling only comics, I don't know if that is can sort of really rake in a lot of
No, it doesn't. I just mentioned it's not going to be the bread and butter earning source at all. So getting the concept out there
is take Angry Mousey, make it into an animated series, give it to Netflix or Amazon Prime, and on the back of it, shares revenues with you on both, as well as the L&M.
I'm just going to strike this deal right now for you.
Right
here. Deal abhi hone wala hai
Rajiv.
And Anil, just to add to this, right? I'm just responding to one of the questions that's been asked by Adip, right? To the panel, I'm saying that I work for two iconic organizations where both have tried at different times to really lock into this adult audience, whether it's Cartoon Network with Adult Swim, or whether it was back with MTV with doing all of
Beavis and
Butthead and that entire genre. So whenever we speak anecdotally and say, because I'm one of the main reasons for being here is a big, huge collector of comics and also big fanboy of comics, right? But what is to divorce whether you being a fan and anecdotally hanging around with a bunch of people who think that's cool and a larger universe of this country, right? Satish, more power to you in putting out these products, not just in terms of the comics, but also I agree with you that even though we doubt the fact of this offline and retail being run by like a landlord, most of it is based on rent, right? But specifically a brand like yours, unless you didn't see it, touch and feel, most people would not even know how to experience this whole fan genre and buying stuff off the net, right? So I think even having some of those stores there gives more power to what you do. But coming back to this genre of adults, why is it in India that we consider that adults don't watch animation and it's only a kids preserve? I think it all comes down to somebody, because Animax did it with Sony too, and somehow the model has to sustain commercially. So whether you talk about TV or VOD or e-commerce, eventually the creator asks the question that, why isn't there an audience? But the question I have is that who's investing? So if the merchandise or the content investment is a heavy part of this expense, that people land up saying, why not do the tried and tested thing which actually has an audience? So unless somebody out of pure unbridled passion decides to say, I'm keep on investing on this for the long term, I do believe there is a large audience in this country. As I was saying right in the beginning, we keep talking, this is the only country which doesn't play Western classical music because we say who listens to it. We ghettoize this into Bollywood, and that's the only music that is played except now, right? So I'm talking about radio stations. So in that context, our niches are large. We have a large base in this country which would love these comics, but it requires, whether it's comics or whether seeing some of this into animation, would require the investment of a platform, because the product cost is the largest part of it, and we are constantly mitigating a risk, right?
Yeah. So let's get on to the questions that the audience is asking. I can go on, and I can start trying to be a priest into marrying these two guys, but they'll have to take their vows separately. But let's get on with it. How do you protect your brand against unauthorized products? At what stage should we copyright a character story? Then there is a question, since politics is an interesting topic in India, this question is around animated series on political humor, like a cartoon president, and do licensing, merchandising without legal hurdles. So who wants to take it up? Rajiv, Mitali, whoever wants to step up.
I'll just take
unauthorized. Sorry, go ahead, Jiggy.
No, I just want to take.
Let Mitali speak. Yeah,
let Mitali speak. Everything related to it. I just want to say that we don't have a sense of humor. We should do nothing about politics. We'll get killed. This is the wrong time to speak up in any form. The last thing you want is to put up animation talking about the regime and to. Don't do it.
Point taken. Mitali.
Yeah, no, I think I'll just address the question on unauthorized products. I think, that is something which is plaguing our nation, and probably every other market. China, obviously, we all know is, one of the biggest issues here. The thing is that, Anil, in a case of Me Too products, they are not always as easy to detect because, for a common man, for somebody who's buying a licensed product, they might not get into the nitty-gritties or even understand that. Obviously, if we look at it, for example, if my creative team, for instance, sees something which is, not a licensed product, they freak out. They completely freak out. There's this whole drama that happens. And for example, we see these lunch boxes. Okay, you'll have a Minions authorized, proper, perfect artwork on it, and then it says Mippins. It's disaster. We know that, but frankly, there is very little that you can really do to curb that much because parallel imports keeps happening. There's not much that you can do. But from our end, from Black, White, Orange, we always try this whole three-pronged approach. What we do is we try and educate the licensees in terms of what an authorized product looks like. What a style guide looks like. What proper artwork looks like. Why a fake product is a fake product, and so on. Secondly, we have a retail team who's always kind of scouting all these websites and retail stores and all, and you'll find hordes of illegitimate stuff there as well. So every time we find that, we go back to the licensor because we as representatives are not really allowed to take legal action here, which is a big challenge again. So we need to go back to the licensor. We need to give them proof. Then they do their works of sending cease and desist notice, and if somebody does get intimidated, they'll bring it down. But the next day they'll just put a new barcode and then put it back on marketplace. So that's again.
I'm going to step in here, Mitali. So the music industry and the video industry has a very coordinated approach towards stamping out piracy.
Right.
So why doesn't the merchandising and licensing industry have raids and squads? Or it's too expensive?
I think Disney has tried the whole.
I'm not saying Disney. I'm saying the whole industry gets together, works closely with the authorities, and regularly raids different places which are. Jiggy.
No, I think one of the main reasons is that all of these IPs and the owners of those IPs have to come together towards doing that. In the case of the music industry, it did come together, and it's very, very productive. It's just not happening in India because a host of these brands, firstly, it's not omnipresent yet in terms of the industry per se, is not large enough yet. And the second is that...
how large is it today? Is it 1,000 crore business?
How large is the business?
Yeah, 1,000 crores?
No, much more.
More than that, much more.
Much more. It's about, I think the last number was 6,000 odd crores, right? Wasn't it?
That's large. That's $1 billion.
Yeah.
That's large. You all can easily put resources together and start doing the raids. If you're committed. If you're busy doing your own thing.
I'd like to add one point here. So example, so we need to, when we are as Green Gold, so when we come across products that
you know how big is the music industry? 1,400 crores. And they do this. Anyway, I'm going to step back. Sorry, Rajiv, continue.
No problem. So just mentioning a point, sometimes when we come across products that are pirated, first we analyze who's making this. Is it the people on the street? Like example, they were this recently we have seen kids standing on the traffic signals selling balloons, and in summer it is usually they're putting those what do you call those sun blockers with their favorite different animation characters. So when we come across something like this, it's almost impossible to get to the source of it, and sometimes we just say, okay, this is great for the brand, it's free publicity.
No, but I'm not talking at that level. I'm talking about a more organized, unorganized level, if you get what I'm saying. And I'm being told to wrap up because we've spoken too much. But let's have a last point.
Yeah, the last point on my end is so there is these kind of things, and then there is people who are educated, putting factories without a license manufacturing. So what we do is we target those kind of people who are illegally manufacturing. They have the money to buy the license. Those are the people we target. And I think whenever the industry comes together, we take your point. I think we should do that.
Yeah, so 6,000 crores, music industry had dropped to 400, 900 crores. Now it's about a 2,000 crore business. It's still 1/3 your size. You guys had better come together. Sorry to be so insistent. Yeah. Any last points from any of you all before we wrap up?
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Satish, Mitali, Jiggy, Abhijeet, your last points before we wrap up.
Buy legit stuff. It'll be way cooler every time.
Okay, Satish?
Yeah, I think, a couple of points from my side. One is, I think the industry, I think you've made a good point that it has to come together to sort of do something about piracy, especially on marketplaces, because that seems to be the biggest hurdle out here. So if we can regulate that, then the business will grow on its own anyway. And I think we have to also focus a lot on Indian IPs and try and work with creators here. Rajiv, we've all been saying that this is a great success story. So if there is one success story, then more people have got to sort of try and focus on this rather than just Western IPs. So that's my 2 bits.
Okay, Jiggy.
No, I've said enough.
No, relax. Don't mind it. But I hope I wasn't rude.
No, not at all. Not at all. No.
Yeah, you said enough. Okay, then Mitali.
I completely agree with Satish. Make Indian IPs cooler, make them more aspirational. I think that is definitely the way to go. And a lot more focus on creating creative assets. A lot of licensors, creators don't really do that. They think, style guides are just by the way, but there's a reason why the West actually spends so much on creating these. So there's lots more that can happen.
Set up an association.
Yeah.
Get Rajiv to head it. He heads the Telangana. He's been doing lots of changes in AVGC policy over there, and start doing initiatives on the ground, as well as online, like Satish said. Is everyone listening? Mitali didn't mention that. She skipped it.
I think the most important one is to start with online, because getting onto offline can make you spend most of your life. So online is a good place to start with, because that's also...
Yeah, but so set it up, please. Set it up, all you guys. You're here now. And imagine with Rajiv's leadership and the way he's driven the Telangana industry. I'm not flattering Rajiv, but yes, there's a fanboy moment. Okay, finally, Abhijeet.
No, I think I have expressed my points. So, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. I hope you guys didn't mind my pressing the buttons and pressing your triggers, but that's what the session is intended to start provocative thinking. Thank you for being a part of this, and wish you guys all the best and lots of success going forward. My favorite dream is that an Indian comic character is worn in New York. I'd like to see Angry Mousy being worn in New York by a white person, or a colored person, or a Latino, or a Chinese, or a Japanese, and he knows who Angry Mousy is. All the best to all of us. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Bye.